Hello, I'm Susan Dunlop and welcome to episode 34 of Coffee Contemplation with Susan. If you've not been here before, the podcast is about women sharing stories, showing their human side, sharing the darkness and the light that results from their life experiences, vulnerabilities, successes, giving insights, hope, and maybe a smile to the listeners in the podcast. It's being listened to in 8 countries so far, and it's been an absolute pleasure to have the guests on that I've had so far. Today's guest is yet another woman that I have come across in my path, as in serendipity, that I don't tend to go to many networking events. I network online with fellow coaches, but I stepped out to go to the International Coaching Federation's breakfast a while back. And as we did the intros, I explained that, I've just recently been coaching more and more girls in the late teens, which was something strangely I had actually written into my mission about one of the areas my coaching practice is going to focus on in future. And so in the coffee break, I met this young lady and she said to me, I really love to understand where you're taking that because her background is in working with adolescents. So today we are having Lucy Holland on to have a chat with. Lucy is also a coach, obviously being at the International Coaching Federation. She has worked for 15 years in health and adolescent health. Lucy is a social work clinician, a researcher, an academic, and a consultant. In a social work capacity, Lucy has worked with individuals and families across the tertiary and community health sectors in acute trauma and community settings. And she's got specific expertise in social work, care and counselling with young people and families in the context of chronic illness and palliative care. And she's offering coaching services in those fields with a specific focus on working with young people and parents. Obviously, we connected because my interest is in helping young women set themselves up with self-confidence, the ability to say no to what doesn't serve them, even work in life skills practices. So I mix in life coaching with mentoring for the young women that I've actually served so far. So I'd just like to say welcome, Lucy.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much for having me today.
It's been a pleasure just in the last few weeks getting to know you a little bit. So today we'll get to know you a little bit more.
Absolutely.
So what I was thinking in relation to the work you're doing with adolescent health, quite often when we have guests on it, we always look at, what did you want to be as a child or what led you to becoming this person that you are in your career?
Look, that's such an interesting question because I think life takes us on many journeys and down many paths that we couldn't predict at the beginning. So I started out life wanting to be an architect or an air hostess, neither of which have eventuated because I'm very tall and my mum told me I was too tall to be an air hostess in heels on planes, which was probably very accurate. And I actually ended up with a real interest and passion in people and working with and understanding human behaviour and the way people interact and live and people's values. So that led me down the path initially of studying psychology. And I got really interested at that point in child development and youth development, as well as the way the human brain works and functions. It's a fascinating beast that kind of plays a huge role in our lives and how we understand ourselves. So that really piqued my interest in adolescent development, being a period of real unique human development and opportunity and breaking boundaries and breaking down walls and that sort of thing. And I was interested particularly at that point in autism spectrum disorders as well. So my interest peaked in adolescence, and then I moved country and found myself working in adolescent oncology, which was my first foray into the adolescent health sphere and adolescent chronic illness. And through that work, I observed real value in the way multidisciplinary professionals work together in the health space and a real interest in and perceived value in the profession of social work. So I went back and did some masters of social work and have ended up working in a combination of clinical and research roles and policy roles, really focusing on supporting adolescents who interface with the healthcare system to fulfill their potential, live their best lives, and also look at trying to adapt the healthcare system, which doesn't well meet the needs of young people. It better meets the needs of younger children or older adults. So really interested in looking at systemic change too, to better include and support the voice of the young person and their family.
Okay. And in relation to adolescents, what age bracket is it that you mostly work with?
That's a good question. So we know the onset of puberty marks adolescence around the age of 12, although that's variable. And then the adolescent young adult years, which is my area of interest, spans up until about the mid-20s or late 20s, when we consider that brain development continues up into the mid-20s. So even though we expect young people to be adults by the time we legally say they are at 18, brain function isn't fully developed up until kind of that mid-20s point. So where young people have huge capacity in terms of their brain, it's not necessarily what we consider adult. And the health system defines young people, adolescents, young adults, as 15 to 25 because of these social and developmental transitions that kind of happen across that period of time. We talk about these processes of brain development, we talk about developmental processes, but you can have a 16-year-old who's got a child in a relationship and has left school and is looking at working or starting a career at a very relatively young age. Compared to me, I was still at home, scraping by, studying at university well into my 20s. So it's very individual. And I think probably that touches on a really good point that we need to support young people to live their life path and not be so rigid actually around the way the system expects them to traverse that development.
Yeah, I'm very much on that individualistic approach. And I think that I've seen that through, I've got 3 daughters, they're now 30, 27 and 23, but they're all so unique in the way they needed to approach their career after school. And it was okay to not have to stick to the structure of you must. I'm not really a rules girl, I suppose, but...
Well, it doesn't. Rules don't work for everyone. That's by nature,
No.
And it's probably they were different, I imagine, in the way that you parented them and what they needed from you as well. And, we are all so unique. So being aware of our individual difference in the way that we each need to navigate our own path, I suppose, is what I'm very interested in. And I think that there's opportunity to start to support young people to recognise that from earlier on, so we don't get to adulthood and then kind of go, oh crap, I've been following a system that actually doesn't fit me and it has stifled me in some way.
Exactly. How about we do some clarity work on what the definitions of things are? Because I know when I have people come to coaching, they'll say, I don't know whether I need a coach or a counsellor or whatnot. So maybe can we just do a little bit of if someone, an adolescent, was to come to you and you say, hey, I'm going to coach you, or they need you as a psychologist or as a counsellor or a social worker, what does that all mean to them?
Look, that's a very good question. And there is obviously overlap because all of those professions are about the individual and the human, essentially, at the end of the day. But there are distinct differences. So psychology is very much focused on diagnosing and understanding behavioural, psychological challenges that people might face, and then applying a combination of, I suppose, evidence-based interventions and therapeutic techniques to help people move beyond those. So you may be struggling with, anxiety or depression or personality disorders or substance use complexities. And the way a psychologist would approach that is to look at what that diagnosis means and then think about what are some interventions that we can use. So often through talking interventions, so sitting down one-on-one, and that's another commonality among the professions is that they're all talking based. And look at, specific kinds of interventions to help you manage your anxiety or depressive symptoms or whatever may be going on for you. Social work is a little bit broader than that. So social workers don't focus on diagnosing. So in a social work capacity, I would also, if someone came to me with anxiety that needed support and intervention, I could help from a counselling perspective. So what are some of those evidence-based interventions that I could use to support them? And some of those may be the same as a psychologist would use. But from a social work perspective, I would also be looking at what are the other things going on in your life. So are relationships tricky or are they supportive? Or is the home environment really supportive or tricky? What are your education goals or your work goals, and what is some skill development we can look at doing there? Are finances a barrier, or have you got the resources that you need to do the things you want to do? So social work has less expertise than psychology in terms of the interventions to support those diagnoses usually, but a broader scope and a broader approach to understanding life and strengths and challenges. And then coaching, which you can probably talk to better than me, Susan, is really very strengths-based. So it's really looking at, often there might be challenges, but we don't need to delve so much into the past. Where are you at the moment? What are your goals? And how can we sort of recognise you being the expert in your life and me as a facilitator, as a coach, to strategise and work out, how can you build on your strengths to get where you're going. So there's confusion because there is overlap, but it is slightly different approaches and philosophies for all three professions.
Because I find when I look at therapy is about exploring the past and, releasing something maybe that's come up in your past. So social work sounds very much like coaching, but is social work been around longer than coaching?
Social works the approaches that you would use are potentially similar in your work with people. Social workers can have a variety of professions. So they could be working as advocates to help people navigate the system, or they could be working in child protection to actually look at child safety and enacting government policies around, placing children with families, or for the police, or in the healthcare setting, you may be looking at kind of discharge from hospital. You use that whole framework, but there are different roles within that.
Sounds quite diverse.
Very.
So you can work in an area of probably passion or expertise that you best can bring social work to.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Thank you for that, because I probably needed to understand that too.
I'm not sure if it helped. The problem with social work is it is a relatively broad and ambiguous kind of profession, and there is overlap. So I'm not sure if that helps clarify.
No, well, it helps me because I in terms of, say, the girls that I have actually spoken with and to their parents, I think, I wonder what mix we could actually put together that would actually support them. As I've said, like I've met you, and there's obviously Sylvia, we've met with the ICF recently. I think, how could we actually, all three of us, support in our own unique ways? So it just was good to understand how would social work fit into that. And do you do therapy?
There is a counselling. So the words kind of therapy and counselling really refer to those evidence-based talking interventions. So some examples of that you may have heard of are cognitive behavioural therapy, or acceptance commitment therapy, or motivational interviewing. They're different ways to look at supporting people to change behaviour or overcome obstacles. Doing those things is what you would call therapy or counselling. So there are components of counselling and therapy within both psychology and social work. Psychologists, so the training for a psychologist delivers them more expertise in that than the basic training for social work.
And we didn't even talk about psychiatry. So psychiatry is...
So to be a psychiatrist, you have to be a medical doctor, and then you specialise in mental health and psychiatry. And the difference between psychology and psychiatry is that psychiatrists diagnose, but they can also prescribe medication. So they have a medical approach as well as a counselling approach that they can use together.
Because it has become such a, a social media thrown around type topic. So I think it can be quite confusing if someone's going, everyone's having therapy nowadays. But what does that mean? And is that really what everyone needs? So if they're going to go to, say, their GP to be referred to someone, or come to look for life coaching, it just maybe be good to actually really set out what is the, what are the common ground or what's not common ground. And so you're better off going in one direction versus the other, or mixing it up.
Absolutely. And often it's about, it may be clear if you've got something that's a very serious mental health diagnosis that you may see a psychiatrist and a psychologist, for example. But it may be that if you have a life block that you're trying to move beyond, or a goal that you're trying to move towards, it could be that social work is of value, or it could be that coaching is of value. And often it's actually about the fit. I mean, it's like a little black dress, I say. You've got to shop around until you find the right fit for you. Because not every little black dress is the same.
But there is a little black dress out there for everyone.
Absolutely. And everyone needs a little black dress. That's the other thing. So we have this stigma around mental health that it's this really hard thing we can't talk about. And I think it's changing. But the reality is we're all social creatures, and we can't do life by ourselves, and we all face challenges. So to reach out and ask for support, or an objective opinion, or someone who might think differently to you, is is something we all need. And I think we need to make that much better recognised.
You can see the benefits every day. Like anyone that actually decides to just share that next bit of information with someone that's not going to judge them, but have that, a real conversation back and forth, so that you can see they just breathe out and you think, oh, it is so good. Like if they didn't have that conversation, it's just rolling around in their head constantly, probably not sleeping well, it's probably impacting relationships, work. Like, get it out. I think the whole thing is just get it all out of you and, explore it, shrink it down in the light, I think.
Absolutely agree. And we have this kind of false perception, like society tells us that we see all the online posts of people being gloriously happy all the time, and we have this expectation of constant happiness in our lives, and it's not the reality of life or how we're living, or, the one photo of gloriousness that you see of someone on holiday, that's a fraction of their whole life experience.
We're going to talk about that, so I'm actually going to get you on that in a minute. So how about what we might move on to, and thank you for sharing that knowledge. I was thinking in terms of the darkness to light piece. I asked you in that prep work, for you to ponder, what health or life hurdles have you personally faced and how did you overcome them? So I thought we'll talk about that. But I was also thinking in terms of, this being a multi-generational audience and, that you sharing your information for the sake of someone else. I've got some questions around that in relation to some young girls that I've been talking to lately in terms of relationships and whatnot. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So let's start with you though. So health and life hurdles. Nitty gritty.
The nitty gritty. Yeah. It's look, being someone when you're talking to other people, it's always easier to talk to other people about their stuff than it is to talk about your own stuff. But I'm very happy to share it because I think it breaks down those barriers. Look, I've been really blessed in my life, to be honest. My health has been good. I have a really loving family we present challenges to each other often, but I think that's the nature of the beast. So in terms of my health, I've been incredibly fortunate. I've been a nomad, so I've moved around a lot as a child and into my adulthood. So I think I worked out of, shifted house, I think 14 times in the last 6 years or something like that.
Gosh.
Lived in 3 states in Australia, was born in the UK and then grew up in New Zealand, attended a lot of schools and then shifted to Australia with the intention of being here for 6 months, and I haven't left 12 years later. So it's that thing about unexpected life paths, I think. Probably my most significant hurdle occurred about 3 years ago and was in relation to the breakdown of a major relationship for me. So was very committed and embedded in, I'm 38 almost, so 37 now. At that point you're thinking about establishing a family and settling down, and everything was heading along that path. And I'd shifted as is my want to be with my partner, and we were establishing a life and became very financially tied. And then that relationship imploded essentially in a very nasty way, with lots of infidelity and, challenging emotional environment and behaviours. So really my world shattered, which shattered my sense of self and my place and home, and it resulted in me moving again, and really was a hugely transformative event in my life, and one now which I'm so grateful for. But because I wouldn't have been where I am or who I am now without the experience. But honestly, 3.5 years of devastation and recovery and rebuilding of self and sense of self and sense of self-worth. So I think one of the questions was, how did you overcome that? And that's a really tricky question. It was messy. There was a lot of drinking and crying and running away and trying to function and not being able to function very well, and trying to see a path forward and it not being very clear. But through the process, it was about reaching out and connecting with the people that loved me and where I was safe. It was about learning to let go of things that no longer served. it was about learning to sit really with the emotions and not numb them, which is challenging when it's painful, and is still not necessarily easy all the time. And it just took time. Identified the things that filled me up little by little, really focused on the positive and gratitude. And I read a lot from other people who've been through, traumatic or similar experiences. And I sought their insights about what helped or what worked. And it's a slow process of recovery and overcoming that. But it's interesting because it's almost like the shattering, these things that happen to us. I've worked a lot in grief and trauma with parents, losing their young people or who have lost children or, accidents and injury and all of that sort of stuff. And you see in those moments, as horrific as they are, and as this was personally for me, there is such resilience in the human spirit, and we have such strength within us. And for me, the shattering that happened of myself and my external world as well, I guess, was really the impetus for me to come together again and be rebuilt, but in a very different iteration of myself. And like I said, now I'm so grateful for that process, because without that, the extremity of that event, the growth wouldn't have happened like it has. And certainly the gratitude took bloody ages to come to. It's not like you face extreme pain and you're suddenly thankful. Like, it doesn't work that way.
Grateful I can hold a pen in my hand is all I can be grateful for, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm grateful for the glass of wine or, the conversation with my mum or whatever it is. But, it doesn't work that way. You're angry and you're pissed off, and it's all part of the human experience.
Do you think there's an expectation by others for you just to get over it? Did you feel that at all? Because I find with young people who are trying to traverse this type of thing, it's the outside pressure that they perceive.
Yeah, I think there was. I think there is. I think there's kind of the sense of, oh, well, when you're not in it yourself, there can be an expectation of, oh, well, it's happened. Even, for me, a couple of years down the track, it's like, well, you seem externally to have a new life and a new direction, and I was in a new home and I was in a new place, and yet the emotional rebuilding was still happening. So yes, I think there can be that expectation. It's tough, but I think you almost have to ignore it. And the where you find your tribe of people that will almost just sit with wherever you're at, and not have an expectation that you need to be any different than you are. And when you need to yell, let you yell, and when you need to a hand holding, then doing that, and when you need to blow off some steam, doing that, or whatever it might be. I'm a real introvert. So for me, a lot of it was about, I retreated from a lot of people and a lot of things to be able to have the energy to determine what I needed to do and to recover and figure out a path forward. So for me, actually, it was really important to have that external support through I saw a psychologist and a counsellor, and that was incredibly valuable to me because it was an objective space away from people that knew me, where I could have unload or, and just seek that objective support, I guess, through the process.
And even to have a scheduled appointment that that's your next time you're going. So you've got what you discussed today, which is like what happens with coaching. We always say that the beautiful work happens in between sessions.
Absolutely.
So is that sitting with what you discussed, let that settle, and then you move to the next. It's like just baby steps forward, isn't it? So even in what you've experienced, it must have been very many, many, many baby steps that you've had to go through.
Oh, lots of baby steps, and then lots of baby steps backwards, and then starting again and finding a new way forward, and then moment by moment.
Yeah. In relation to that, so I don't think I've actually had a guest on recently that we've talked about this type of a major relationship breakdown. I have had just conversations with young women recently, and I thought we'd talk about that that really Instagram image where, like, I see them down on Hastings Street and they'll be sitting at a cafe table and not even paying attention to each other, but getting the selfie. Look at me, I'm at, Aroma's Cafe or whatever, but I think it's wherever. But I look at them and think, are you here? Where are you? There's a lot of that type of imagery out there for their friends to see. And one young girl said to me, she said, you know what, now that I've actually had the guts to say no more to her relationship, she said if she could actually see the pictures, in one hand or the other. So one hand would be the good pictures of all the good times, and the other pictures would be the other times. You said that second handful would be far heavier than the happy snaps. So is there anything you can, in terms of what you do with adolescents, to help people understand that sort of moving on piece or letting go? How do they sit with that space where they would love to have just had the boyfriend come over for a cuddle? Because that's the space I find I hear a lot, is that I just don't want to have no one to have a cuddle with. What is it that they need to think of something different to do?
That's a really good question. I think we as humans we're so programmed. We remember all the good, life, like I said, we're in a relationship that's broken down. You hold on to the moments and those photos in that hand that were the Instagram moments, that were the positive components. And we forget very easily the bad stuff, especially when we're feeling the pain of the separation and the loss of the person in our life and all of that sort of thing. I think there's a couple of things. One is just recognizing and normalizing the fact that missing someone and wanting that company and solidarity and partnership is a totally human experience, and not trying to dismiss that as, yeah, but it's not good for you and you've broken up and you should just move on. That same thing again, you should just move on. So, okay, well, this is a completely normal experience. And of course you feel that way. Why wouldn't you? You've got this huge gap in your life where this person was and are no longer. So the first thing is just acknowledging and recognizing that. And then it's actually about probably a discussion about, like, the Instagram photo thing. Let's actually talk about what was the reality. Like, you're allowed to miss this in the person in the cuddle, but what actually was the reality of your relationship, and what are some strategies you can use to, hold on to the reasons that this has ended for you. So how can you remind yourself when you have those moments and you're going in your head telling yourself the story that it was wonderful, and you're going to those Instagram photo moments, how can you remind yourself that actually you're worth more than that relationship and you will find something better, and it's not what you wanted for these reasons. And I've used strategies like I write myself a list and I put it on the bathroom mirror and I see it every morning, because our mind has this magic way of running away with the what ifs or the what could have beens, or really, really stuck in the past stories of our lives. And I think reminding ourselves that it's just our mind running down a track, to stop that thought process and actually remember something tangible. Go look at your bathroom mirror where you've stuck a bit of paper that says, this is why, and these are reasons are valid, and I'm going to instead focus my thoughts on what I can do today to fulfill that plan, fulfill the bathroom mirror plan.
Because even you were making me realise the amount of people I've seen who've been in that stage. I think my parents were, they're in their 70s, Dad was 80, but they were just on that cusp of, you must stay together no matter what. The older generation, which is my husband's parents, they did stay together no matter what, where my parents did that breakaway, but I could see the pain of mum believing that the relationship was more than what it was. But then over, bit by bit, she'd chip away at realising that wasn't good and that wasn't good. But, that's probably a role model that, even generationally, we've all sort of grown to watch, going, oh, well, they've put up with it. It's okay,
Oh, God, absolutely. Yeah, well, if you've been in a family where there is violence, or where there is, disharmony, or you're modelling for what a relationship should look like is not ideal, maybe, then kind of it's setting those foundations for what does a healthy relationship look like, and what do you want for your life, and is this fulfilling both of you in the partnership? And I love that exercise, actually. So it's like, I can imagine sitting down with someone in front of them going, okay, well, let's make a list. Like, what's in the Instagram good pile and what's in the, the crap photo pile of actually the reality of the things that weren't so good, and let's balance it out. Like, let's look at this didn't work.
So in relation to that, to what you said earlier in terms of your own recovering, the tribe was important, because I think also if you're looking at what the Instagram crowd are watching in terms of your friendships, if they're seeing all that happiness, they're not seeing the part of you that you're skipping, all the reality.
No.
So it's hard to find support in a group of connections versus a real tribe.
I completely agree. I had to take myself off social media altogether, which may in this day and age sound dramatic, but I didn't. It's not real. One of the realizations that for me out of my experience was really solidifying what are my values and what am I striving for in my life and what is real and what is not. And what we see on those platforms is not real. It's not about our innate humanness. It's not about really, capabilities or capacities. It fosters this comparison and the sense that we're less than all the time. There's always someone prettier, got more money, having more adventures, having more fun than me, doing other things that I want to be doing. And that's the reality of the world. It's about identifying what's your life, what do you want your life to look like, actually. And so for me, I had to block out all that external noise to see clearly what that looked like. That's the key. There's no real connection or community or network of support. Or
for young people that you're working with, do you ever give them some ideas on how to break that social media connection and find that better connection?
Yes. I mean, and I think the first bit of, like, young people are smart, right? Like they know the benefits and the drawbacks of social media. They can think outside the box. They're not yet really so confined and socialized into thinking that life is, sometimes as adults we're so on this path to more money, more success, more hierarchy, more hierarchy. We're so socialized into that model. And the more we have, the more commitments we have, the more we're on that track. So, young people are aware often and they're really intelligent, but it's actually just about, I think it's about a values-based conversation. Do you actually think this is real? Like, what do you actually want from your social connections? And, do you want a tribe or do you want to be famous? Maybe you want both, that's okay. But actually let's understand what this platform offers in terms of the level of connection and what a tribe or, real community and relationships might look like. And then sometimes it's about skill development around how do you find those people, your tribe, how do you find those people and how do you start having those relationships? Because we have been so disconnected, and particularly with COVID, by necessity, we've had to communicate and connect online. So sometimes it's about skill development and actually planning around how that might look.
Yeah, so skill development sounds smart. I think that's, I can see that. There's someone I follow, Green Supercamp, and she always uses that hashtag, the kids are watching. And, it's about the role model space too. So, I suppose, so yes, interesting. Yes, I wasn't presuming that kids aren't smart, but I was thinking, but it's actually that we're more socialized in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, these platforms are where you go to actually connect now. Maybe it starts with us to disconnect from those type of spaces and show a
role model differently. I completely agree. It's interesting. Like, I was working with a young woman and her mum, and the young woman, I was working with her because they were eating, just in concerns about body image and eating disorder and those sorts of questions being asked. It was amazing how many comments mum was making completely subconsciously about, oh man, I feel fat today, or about herself, that wasn't about the young woman, but role modeling this behavior and attitude about appearance really is my priority and it really matters, and I judge everything again. How I feel is how I look, and all these comments that were kind of being role modeled to this young woman. So I think that's lovely, that hashtag, the kids are watching, for us to become more conscious of what we say, even because we say it all the time, oh God, my pants don't fit, or I'm not going to have that because I feel fat today. All right, we don't think that comes out of our mouth, but actually what's messages that's sending to our children.
So if you could set up a role model course, you could just get that going, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah, I'll work on that. Well, I think, to be honest, by years in adolescent health, it's just no one teaches you how to be a parent, right? Like, no one tells you this is how a child develops, and this is how a child's brain develops, and this is what happens when they hit adolescence, and this is why they take risks, and it's neurologically programmed in their brains, and it's normal. No one teaches that stuff. And so I think it's as much about supporting parents who are often trying their absolute best to navigate these really tricky developmental processes, but they're not empowered to do it. There's no.
So. And as you said early on, that there's that space where I think I mentioned to you earlier on, said that hard place you get to when the kids are leaving year 12 and you're getting discarded as a mum at the same time as sort of moving into menopause, and everything's like, oh, I can't cope. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this anymore. And just to have someone to actually lean on and go, oh, am I normal? Is this okay? What is one thing I could do this week that might feel like I'm actually being successful again would be really useful, you know?
Well, and often the other question is, who the hell am I at that point? Like, you've been raising a child for 18 years and focused all of your energy and attention on making sure that little person survives and grows and does the best they can. You know, they fly the nest. So you're like, man, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm doing. You lose by necessity and out of love often. But we tend to kind of, it's a really tricky moment in time.
It is. And I said, yes, I felt it, but yeah, it'd be nice to be able to support people through that more. And like even some of the parents that have actually referred, you know, their kids to me, I think, God, I would love to actually, you know, support them more in a different way, even just to do like how we do coffee and contemplation, just to go and have a coffee with them, just let them vent it all out, even for, you know, the
Absolutely.
5 minutes.
Like, this is totally normal. Like, you're not going crazy. You're among the masses. Like, this is completely understandable, and this is all normal.
Yes, and we all grow from it, whatever came about, whatever happened.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think what I might move to is, what would be the most valuable advice you would give 7-year-old you that you wish you'd received from your own mum when you were 7?
Look, I was so fortunate, I think I said before, totally blessed in my life. And I did receive this from my mum, who is a bit of a rebel and an anarchist, which I love. And she told me not to believe anything that anyone told me. And that is the exact same best advice that I would give a child. And she meant it in the context of, you know, we all, kind of the stuff we've been talking about, we see these images on social media and we compare ourselves, and it tells us, even if it's not verbally telling us, it tells us that we're not good enough, or we should be better, or we should be more, or et cetera, et cetera. And we enter the education system where there's this arbitrary testing. So you're ranked in this hierarchy against grades. The education system doesn't fit most children very well because it's not designed to support development. It's designed to program us into fulfilling the goals of the curriculum. So within that hierarchy, we're told that if you're not an A student, you're not at the top of the rung, then you need to do better and you're not good enough. So the best advice my mum gave me was, don't believe it. Don't believe it. We all have unique human potential. What the system tells us and what other people, or the messages we take from the world about our value aren't true. We all have the capacity and the capability to achieve, you know, to our maximum potential. And that's the focus that we should have. You know, what is my contribution? What is my path? What's going to bring me joy? How can I support and bring joy to others? So don't believe it. You know, and she used to say, and same thing here, you know, question me on what I tell you and what I say to you. And, you know,
that's good.
Really develop that critical lens and that ability to really think about and question.
And to think in terms of that, like, you know, to think, how can I and what can I do? You know, like, because the opposite is, well, what if I don't try all that? There is something that is uniquely you. What is it that you're having the guts to go, you know what, no, I don't care. I'm going to give it a shot. Or
actually, you know, I agree with you that I don't want to be that thing that you're telling me I can't be anyway, but what I do want to do is this thing. I don't want it, so why does it matter? You know, it's, what's my unique path, I guess.
We're going to finish off on your favourite mantra or quote that gets you by in hard times.
This was a hard one because I have so many. So I've got this scrapbook full of poems and quotes. I love the poem Wild Geese by Mary Oliver, which is essentially about this thing we've been talking about of flying your own path. And If by Rudyard Kipling was the same, you know, standing in your own power and forging your own path. And I have some favourite quotes. I think leap and the net will appear, which I really love, because often if you are forging your own path, we have to be brave. You know, we have to be vulnerable and we have to be brave and we have to take a step. And we might not necessarily know what the outcome is, but if we're trusting our intuition and, you know, it's not hurting anyone else and it feels like the right thing, you know, be brave and the universe provides. So, you know, we take a step and we take a leap of faith, and if it's really based on that intuition and feels like the right thing, then things work out. I mean, I couldn't have told you 6 months ago, Susan, I would be sitting here in front of you, and it's such a wonderful thing to be, living where I am and sitting here with you and forging these connections. So you don't know, but if you leap, the net will appear.
Yeah, because what can really go wrong? I mean, all you're going to do is really learn from something anyway, so.
Absolutely. And then you leap again. You take a different step in a different direction and you try something else.
I keep getting ready to leap, but leaps involve planes for me, so I'm having to behave a lot more. But I could always leap and start flapping my wings and see how I go.
Yeah. Well, I'd recommend a parachute in that case.
So, Lucy, I think that was a really valuable conversation, and I went different places to where I thought when we first started chatting. But you and I have got many, many conversations to have as we roll out what we're thinking we can help people with in both our spaces. So, absolutely lovely to have you on today, and thank you so much for sharing your story for other people's benefits.
Thank you so much, Susan. Such a pleasure to talk with you always.
Another woman creating change. So, listeners, I hope you got something out of the conversation with Lucy this morning. There's something there to contemplate across even understanding just a simple thing as what is social work. In terms of coaching is very much forward focused. It does go back. We step backwards first into doing some deep foundational work, and that takes you through the space of understanding the limiting beliefs that you may have that you've gathered up over those years. It might be time to release now. So I can help you in coaching. That is what I do. I work with young women through to, at the moment, I've got clients in their 60s. A lot of the work I do is across both a woman who owns a business possibly and life, or is starting a business, or is setting themselves up to make a big change in their life. So please don't hesitate to reach out if I can help you with coaching. Lucy and I are going to continue our chat with another coach who's absolutely incredible as well, who works in career coaching and through another organisation working with girls and boys from 11 years up. So I'll keep you posted on that in my blog. The blog is available on my website, www.susandunlop.com.au, and I'll leave you with that for the day. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.